Hi, everyone. I'm Suma, and this is Colin Drake. He's based in Australia. He has written several books on self-realization and awareness. And I also want to thank Anisha and Abir for introducing me to Colin. They made this interview happen. So thank you, Anisha and Abir. Welcome, Colin.
Thank you. Thank you. It's nice to be here.
And I guess it's super early in the morning for you over there in Australia.
It's 7 o'clock in the morning, but that's not super early for me. That's quite, I've been up some time.
Thank you for making this happen. By the way, I was reading your bio, and when I was reading your bio, I came across like how at some point in your life you thought that self-realization is the purpose of life. Is that still true for you? Do you still think self-realization is the purpose of life?
Well, once self-realization has taken place, then the purpose of life is, that's your focus kind of changes a bit in that the purpose of life then really is to enjoy life as an instrument of the divine and to help others enjoy it also in that way, in which case the best way to do that is to help others awaken wherever you can.
And how did this realization unfold for you in your own journey?
Well, when I was quite young, about 21, I was reading Ouspensky. Have you known Ouspensky? And sorry.
I haven't read his work, but I know that he's very, very popular.
Yeah, well, he was the main disciple of Gurdjieff. You've heard of Gurdjieff? And yes. Gurdjieff was actually quite, if you read Gurdjieff's book, he's quite inaccessible. It's very dense. But Ouspensky kind of popularized it and made it more accessible. And he said quite clearly that in his work that self-realization was the purpose of life. And when I read his book, I thought, yes, this is definitely the case when I was 21. But he made it sound so onerous, so difficult to do, that I thought, well, I might just give it a miss for a bit and see how I go, because I was enjoying life at the time. So, but that was the catalyst that made me think that was the purpose of life. And at the same time, round about then, I had a realization that there was nothing in existence that could actually hurt me in essence. Nothing could actually hurt the essence of what I was. And that kind of provided a nice platform for me to feel that the self-realization was the purpose of life. Yeah.
Apart from reading, was that a long journey for you to occur at realization, or was it like an instant thing for you?
Oh, it was a long journey to feel totally free. I didn't really start again until I was 30 when my wife introduced me to yoga classes. And our yoga teacher was an ex-Jesuit priest, and he used to quote from the Upanishads and the Dhammapada and the Bhagavad Gita, from all the scriptures. He used to, when we were doing relaxation and lying down doing yoga nidra, he used to quote from these scriptures, and that was very inspiring. And from there, then the journey started. And it wasn't actually that I was 30 then. It wasn't until I was 48. That was 18 years later that I finally awoke. Yeah, so it was a long journey. I'm not saying it has to be a long journey. I don't think it has to be a long journey. I think it can be instant. But certainly the way it occurred for me, it was a long journey, yeah.
And sometimes I feel like the word awakening can get used many different ways. How would you describe what is awakening or self-realization?
Well, for me, the whole basis of awakening is to do with self-identity, what you are in essence, to actually discover that within yourself and then live from that essence that you are. So as far as I'm concerned, when you're awake, you have discovered that and you live from that. And within that, there is no longer any existential angst or worry about the small self.
And if someone is new on this path, how would you point them to self-realization?
Okay, well, yeah, I have a very, very simple method, which I've used this method with many people, and nearly everybody gets it almost immediately. However, to get it and to see it then and there is different from actually to integrating that into your whole life, because what happens is you might see your essence very quickly, but then all your old conditioning and your ego and your mind come back in and they just swamp it. So the initial seeing has to be continually redone. You have to continually re-see your essence until you finally, it becomes integrated completely and you realize that's what you are. So, but the method is very simple. I'll take you through it, okay? And it requires no belief systems, no dogma. It's just investigating this moment, this actual moment of experience, okay? Because our lives basically are a series of moment-to-moment experiences. That's what they are. And in any moment to you is just an experience. That's all it is, okay? So when you undertake this investigation, you have to really start with as much as you can with an open mind, not referring the investigation back to previous belief systems or anything. You just to look at this moment, okay? Now, in this moment, we'll go through it slowly and you can tell me if you have any, I'll ask you whether you agree and whether you understand what I'm saying, you know, so, okay. So in this moment consists of 3 elements, okay? Each moment of experience has 3 elements. There are thoughts, and when I say thoughts, from now on, I mean all mind stuff, everything that comes out of the mind, that appears in the mind, we'll call that thoughts, okay? There are sensations, that's everything detected by the body and its sense organs. And there's the awareness of these. Now, these are the only 3 elements in each moment of experience. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Right, okay. So when we look at these 3 elements, okay, because what we're talking about here is identity. What are we within this moment of experience, okay? Now, the thoughts and the sensations these are a flow of ever-changing objects. Would you agree with that?
Yes, they are.
Yes, ever-changing, they're ephemeral, okay? But the awareness is a constant, conscious, perceiving presence. Would you agree with that? It's always there. Okay, yeah. So now we're looking at the identity. What are we? Are we the body mind, which basically we experience by these thoughts and sensations, or are we that which is aware of the body mind? Okay. So if you think that you've been here since you were born, what of these 3 elements, what's actually been here since you were born? Those 3 elements. Which is the only thing that's been here?
Awareness.
That's right. That's right. So I'm sure we all think we've been present since we were born. So the logical conclusion from that is that actually our essence is awareness itself, in which thoughts and sensations come and go, ebb and flow. Okay. So now once you agree with that and you can see that, and that's pretty simple to see that. I mean, it's almost self-evident, in fact. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay.
I do.
Okay. Good. So, I mean, basically that's, if you can see that and live from pure awareness itself, that is self-realization. That's all you need to do. And we've explained it in about 5 seconds. I mean, it's very simple. Okay. However, so let's just carry on from that. Let's just look at awareness itself. Okay. We'll just do, because you can actually, people say you can't use the mind to find the absolute, but I totally disagree. Actually, I think you can use the mind in a logical, reasoning way to tease out facets of the absolute. So let's just do a bit of that for a moment, just for the fun of it, okay? So we look at awareness, okay? Now the first thing, let's just consider it. The first thing about awareness is it's absolutely still. Would you agree with that? Because it's aware of, yeah, okay. And the way I put it in my mind, it's absolutely still because it's aware of the slightest movement of body or mind, right? So it's absolutely still. It's totally silent because it's aware of the smallest sound or the slightest thought. Would you agree with that? Okay. So it's, and now I I like to rhyme things because I find rhyming things, because you probably realize I've written lots of poems, and I like to rhyme things in my investigation because I find rhymes are easier to remember. So okay, so if we go along, so it's silent and serene. Okay, now the next thing is, it's here before all things appear. Now, when I say things, we're still just talking about this moment of experience. So when I say it's here before all things appear, what I mean talking about is before all thoughts and sensations appear. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's the first thing before everything else.
That's right. They appear in it. It's here before all things appear. Then of them, it is the seer. Would you agree with that? It's that which sees the things that appear. Then when, as they must, they disappear, because all things disappear, this is still always here. Okay, so you can see the kind of the way I like to rhyme it. And as you go through this actual process, you can actually apply it to the process itself. So you could, when I say it's here before all things appear, you can apply it to the thoughts that are occurring during the investigation, or to my words. This applies to everything that's being undertaken as we investigate. So it's here before all things appear. Then of them it is the seer. Then when, as they must, they disappear. This is still always here, ready as it were for the next things that appear. Okay, so within that, you still with me? Within that, it's pure. Okay, now when I say pure, what I mean by that is that none of the things that appear in it taint it in any way. Would you agree with that? Okay, it's pure. It's radiant. Now when I say it's radiant, what I mean by that is that it supplies the illumination by which the things that within it, that appear within it, can be seen. Would you agree with that? I.e., everything, for you to perceive anything, it must be illuminated. So it's pure, radiant, and it's pristine, because no thing that appears in it can degrade it. Okay. So the reason I had pristine is so that it falls into my poem. So it's pure, it's still silent and serene, and it's pure, radiant, and pristine. Okay, you with me with that? Right. It's omnipresent in our experience, because experience is awareness of thoughts and sensations. Therefore, it's obviously omnipresent within that. It's omniscient of our experience, because once again, by the same definition, the awareness, experience is awareness of thoughts and sensations. And it's omnipotent in that no thought or sensation has any power over it. No thought or sensation changes it in any way. Okay, you with me with all this now? Okay, so now we've reached very simply, we've reached the still, silent, serene, pure, radiant, pristine, omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent field of awareness in which all things, and when I say things, I'm talking about thoughts and sensations for us, arise, in which they abide, by which they are spied, and into which they subside. Would you agree with that? Right.
I just want to clarify what I'm interpreting. I would. You can share if I'm if I'm wrong. I'm interpreting as, no matter what's happening outside in the world, whether it's good or bad, that awareness is still there.
Of course, everything. Yes, because we can actually, all we've done now so far is we've applied it to our own moment of experience. Okay, but now we can actually expand it to include the universal, to include everything that exists. Okay, and that's quite simple to expand it, because modern science, atomic physics, has shown that the awareness actually saturates the whole universe. Okay. Now, for me, the most cogent examples of this are entanglement. You know what entanglement is?
Yes, I know some people go very deep into it, but I understand it at a surface level. Yeah,
entanglement. I mean, a layman's description of that is that it's where two atomic particles are entangled in such a way that each one is aware of what's happening to its partner, irrespective of how far apart they are. And this entanglement is actually the basis of quantum computing. That's how quantum computing works, by entanglement. Okay, so there's entanglement, and the other for me, the other very cogent universal application of this is that electrons change their behavior when they're aware of being observed. So electrons normally exhibit a wave form, but if they become aware of being observed, they change that to a particle form. Okay, so we have electrons, which obviously have awareness because of this that happens to them, and entanglement, which is atomic particles have awareness because they're aware of their entangled partner. So awareness saturates the whole universe. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I like to define awareness as being consciousness at rest, aware or noticing. Consciousness at rest, noticing the things that appear in it. Okay. Now, that applies to this investigation experience we just did. So if we expand that to the universal, okay, basically what we end up with is a universal, all-pervading, aware stillness, okay, in which it's aware and it's still. Okay, now, all things in manifestation consist of cosmic energy. Would you agree with that? Mm-hmm. Everything in manifestation is energy. And where there is energy, there is movement. Energy and movement are synonymous, okay? Would you agree with that?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, right. Now, all movement, all motion arises in and from stillness, okay? Would you agree with that? It exists in a, you would agree with that? Okay. It exists in a substratum of stillness, okay, all motion. It can be seen relative to that stillness, okay? And finally, it subsides back into stillness. Would you agree with that? So now we have the universe is pervaded with this aware stillness in which all things, which are cosmic energy and thus in motion, arise, they abide. By that, they're spied because it's aware stillness, and into that they subside. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So now, go on.
A metaphor for that would be when we wake up, there's stillness, but everything opens up after that. And when we go back to sleep, everything goes back.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. Yeah, that's a good example. The example I use, which is quite trite, but if you walk across a room, right? Now, before you start walking across the room, there's stillness. You're still, the room's still. As you walk, you're aware of the movement within the stillness of the room itself, okay? And then when you finish crossing the room, once again, there's stillness. So the all movement has arisen in stillness. It takes place in the stillness of the room. There's awareness of it relative to the stillness of the room. And finally, it subsides back into stillness. Okay, so that's a simple example. Yes, so now the universal, we've now quite simply, by applying modern physics to the original investigation, we've got to the universal aware stillness in which all things arise, abide, are spied, and subside. Now, from that, we can just go back to using the original reasoning and say that, okay, there's a universal awareness is pure in that no thing that occurs within it, no movement within it, taints it in any way. Okay, things just come and go in it, leaving it untainted. It's radiant in the same way that it provides the illumination by which these movements, these things within it, can be noticed. It's pristine in that no thing in it can degrade it. It's still silent and serene by definition. It's omnipresent because it saturates the whole universe. Okay. It's omniscient by definition because it's the aware stillness. It's the resting consciousness which notices things occurring within it. And it's omnipotent in that no thing that occurs within it can degrade it, has any power over it. Okay. So now we've now expanded the initial investigation of this moment to the universe and come to exactly the same conclusions. We've reached the still, silent, serene, pure, radiant, pristine, omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent ocean of consciousness in which all things arise, abide, are spied, and subside. So you would agree with all that?
I do.
And it's easy, isn't it? I mean, we haven't used any belief systems there. All we've done is we've investigated this moment and we've applied modern atomic physics to that, to the universal. Yeah. So, and then, I mean, I go even further. From then, this is, do you want me to go even further into this, or shall we, are you happy with that?
No, sure, please go ahead.
Okay.
I'd love to
So
hear.
therefore it's the essence of which all things are comprised. Okay. This awareness, this consciousness, it's the essence of which all things are comprised. Now, if you look at here we are going a bit into looking at scriptures and other religions and other spiritual paths, but if you look at them, basically the absolute reality, this is consciousness at rest we're talking about here. It manifests the universe, or all manifestation, for two reasons. One, for its own pleasure, to enjoy itself. This is the Hindu idea that it's the play of consciousness. Okay, so it manifests for its pleasure, but it also manifests because it wishes to know itself. Okay, and in Sufism, that's called the hidden treasure. So it manifests for its pleasure and to reveal the hidden treasure. Okay, so I can't help rhyming, because the thing about rhymes is they stick in the head. So when I'm going through all this, these little things they just come up, you know. So okay, so now this is the essence of which all are comprised. It's and I like to describe consciousness at rest, pure awareness, as the lover, and the manifestation as the beloved. Okay, the lover and the beloved, because the thing that binds them together is love. Love actually binds the whole universe together. And it's the love of the manifest for the unmanifest, and the unmanifest for the manifest. It's the love that binds the lover and lover together. So are you with me there? Yeah, okay. So we've got the essence of which all are comprised, the lover. Yes, the lover by which things are desired, because it creates the universe and things for its pleasure. The beloved by which they are described, and the love in which the lover and beloved are unified. Okay, you with me with all that?
Yes, I think the Indian words for that is Shiva and Shakti.
Yes, that's right. Yes, Shiva is consciousness at rest, pure awareness, the lover. And Shakti is consciousness in motion, the manifestation of the beloved. Yes, so it's Shiva and Shakti, exactly right. That's right. And within the Christian tradition, actually, God the Father is the unmanifest. Jesus Christ is an example of the manifest, and the Holy Ghost that binds them together, that's the love that binds them together. So this actually, you can expand this to all traditions, in fact, this idea. So, yes, now where we got to? Oh, yes, okay. So, and then it's the cause by which all are inspired. Okay, in some traditions, the unmanifest is called, the absolute is called the causeless cause of all reality. The cause. Okay, and yeah, I've written more about that. I won't go any more deeply into that, but I can if you want me to. About it's the mover, the prime mover. Now in Christianity, it's called the prime mover of all things. It's the mover by which all things are mobilized. It's that which actually creates, because creation is motion. So it's the prime mover by which all things are mobilized. It's the dark by which all things are energized. Now, because everything in the universe arises in and from dark energy. Okay. And do you want me to go any further into that? Because it's been proven. Okay, well, it's been proven that dark energy is constant per unit of space. It doesn't matter how many units of space there are, the same amount of dark energy is constant per unit of space. It's called the cosmic constant, okay? And as the universe is expanding at an ever increasing rate, the amount of space being created is increasing all the time. But the interesting thing about this is that the amount of dark energy per unit of space is still constant, which means, in theory, that the amount of dark energy in the universe is increasing at a great rate, okay? Now, the only way that that can actually happen is if the amount of dark energy that's available in each unit of space is infinite, okay? Because infinity divided by infinity or multiplied by infinity is still infinity. It's still infinity. So the only logical way that can happen is for dark energy to be infinite at any point in space, okay? And actually that's one of the major invocations in the Upanishads, you know, from the full comes the full, but the full is still the full. That indication actually states that the unmanifest is full, however much of it manifests, it's still full, and it never loses any of its fullness. However much of it becomes manifest, the unmanifest is still full. It's infinite. Okay, are you with me here?
So if I understand correctly, even if if the manifestation world, even if you see more and more of that, there'll still be more to explore.
Oh, there's always more to explore. That's the wonderful thing about this, actually, because yes, that's true. That's the wonderful thing about this particular method of mine of investigation. Once you've reached the understanding or the realization of the unmanifest, the absolute, then more facets of that actually become apparent and become seen, and you never actually run out of things to discover, because what you're discovering is what you're investigating is the infinite with the finite mind. So you're investigating something much larger, the greater with the lesser, and because it's infinite, you never run out of things to discover. So that's pretty amazing, actually. So yes, so we've reached where do we get to? Oh yes, so it's the dark by which all things are energized. Okay, now where do we get to? Oh yes, it's the ground of being in which all things arise and in which they reside. Okay, we're talking about the unmanifest, the absolute now. Consciousness at rest, pure awareness. And stop me at any stage if you have a question. Okay, so it's now for anything in existence to be perceived, it has to be illuminated. Illumination is part of for perception. If when you perceive anything or anything is perceived, there are three elements that are required. There's the radiance, which actually illuminates the thing to be perceived. For you to perceive anything, it has to be illuminated. There's the nothingness relative to which you see it, okay? And there's the awareness by which you perceive it, okay? Those three elements are absolutely vital for perception. So, where did I get to? Oh, yes, okay. So, this, it's the ground of being in which all things arise and abide, but it's the radiance by which they can be recognized. It's always radiant. It's sorry, I just yeah, it's the nothingness in which no thing can hide. As I've just said, everything in perception has to have a background of nothingness for you to be able to perceive it. I mean, a simple example of this is, say you're listening to, say there's a bird singing and its song is at 40 decibels and there's a lawnmower going at 80 decibels. Now you're not going to hear the bird. The only way you're going to hear the bird is if the lawnmower turns off and then there's silence, then you can hear the bird. So that perceiving of the bird's song is relative to the silence in which it occurs, as is actually the lawnmower, of course, yes, but or anything that you see, any form that you see it relative to the space in which it's seen. I mean, I'm looking at you now, I can see this white background and I see you relative to the white background. Yeah, so it's the nothingness in which no thing can hide. It's the seer, the pure awareness by which they're spied. It's the perceiver of all things that are materialized. It's the knower by which all things are cognized. Now, when I say that, okay, every single thought or sensation that occurs within your mind body appears in awareness itself. Okay, so every single piece of knowing that has ever been had by any human being appears in awareness itself. Okay, which means that awareness, pure awareness, is the ultimate knower. It's the ultimate knower. Okay, so it's the knower by which all things are cognized. It's you realize I'm continuing with this rhyming theme. That's why it's the enjoyer by which all things are prized. Now, when I say that, what I mean is that every single piece of enjoyment that every mind body has ever had has appeared in awareness itself. So awareness is the ultimate enjoyer. Okay. It's the radiant, aware nothingness in which all things reside. Okay. Because it's radiant, we've always said that, it's aware and it's nothingness. And for me, that is the simple definition of the absolute that I use all the time: radiant, aware nothingness. It's radiant, it's aware, it's not a thing because it's still and all things are in motion, but it's that in which all things and within which and from which all things come. So it's the radiant, aware nothingness in which all things reside and back into which all things must subside, all when they're out of energy, the end of the ride. Okay, so it ends up with being this long stream of investigation, all of which rhymes all the way through. And as I go through this in my mind and actually see each step as I do it, I can feel myself sinking deeper and deeper. And it's not only is it a mental thing, but it's actually a physical and emotional feeling that actually occurs as it happens. So anyway, that's the short explanation of it.
That's a very beautiful explanation, and there are quite a few questions I wanted to ask you. What you shared just now. It opens up a lot of things over here. The first thing I wanted to mention was, thank you so much for mentioning that it's okay to use mind, because I've seen mind can get a very negative stigma when it comes to these topics of awakening and self-realization. Mind is seen as like a negative, bad thing, but it can be helpful in.
It's a beautiful thing. Mind is only a problem when it thinks it's the master and it's not the servant. Okay, the mind is a beautiful servant. It's a wonderful tool for investigation and for just negotiating the physical world. It's wonderful. But if it thinks it's what you are and who you are, then that's the negative aspect of the mind. And everything comes back to identification. You know, as if you believe that you are the mind body, then the mind is going to be a burden. But if you've discovered that you are the pure awareness which uses the mind as a tool, then the mind is a wonderful thing.
And this realization, even if it occurs even at the mind level, it can have so many benefits.
Yes. Because basically you actually have to brainwash yourself. You actually have to convince the mind that you are pure awareness and the mind is not who you are. You have to convince the mind of that to the point where the mind sees that all the time and no longer tries to take over control as being who you are. Because the mind has been in control for so long as who you think you are, that it will continue to try to regain control for a long, long time. So you have to continually come back to this realization of pure awareness. And
it's like,
sorry. Yeah, I was going to say, just a brief aside, this is the problem with Western psychology. Western psychology and Western psychiatry, they automatically assume that you are the mind. That's what they assume. I mean, you go to a psychiatrist and yeah, his underlying assumption, well, let's analyze you. You are the mind. What are you thinking? You know, so on and so forth. Now, if you actually start with that approach, then you've actually started with misidentification as the basis of your approach. And this is a major problem, actually. Yeah. So, sorry, that was an aside. That's one of my little pet things, actually. However, yes. So the mind is a wonderful servant. provided that it's not, doesn't try to take over, it doesn't think that's who you are. And you can actually, there's a very simple way to find out when this is occurring, and that's nearly always at some, and eventually always at some stage. When you misidentify, this will produce mental suffering and worry. And if those occur, then this is a clue that you're misidentifying. And as soon as mental suffering or worry occur, you can immediately see that that's actually, you actually have to do this. I mean, it's a practice, but you can immediately see that that's just an object appearing in the awareness that you are. You are not the mental suffering or the worry, you are that which is aware of those. Now, once you see that, then this brings you back to correct identification as pure awareness, and the mental suffering and worry basically lose their power completely.
I think this reminds me about the subtle difference, like it's not that we are brainwashing, that we are awareness constantly brainwashing. It's more like we are dehypnotizing ourselves.
Well, yes, I mean, when I say brainwashing, I mean the misidentification is the dirt in the mind that you need to wash out. That's what you need to wash out. Yeah. That's why I call it brainwashing. I'm not. Yes, and as I say, you actually have to convince yourself that you are pure awareness by continually bringing yourself back to that realization. Yes, yes.
I agree. And that brings me to the second question that came up for me when we were talking, that metaphor you used about the bird singing, like how you can't really listen to those sounds until the louder sound subsides. Do you think that's kind of like a metaphor even for self-realization? Like when self-realization occurs, there are newer things that appear, that newer objects that may appear that were not seen before. It gets illuminated.
Yeah, these are like the facets. I was talking to you about the facets of the absolute that you discover. What happens is that the mind becomes quiet and one-pointed. And then they appear, these things just appear. And you won't, because the mind is normally, especially if you're misidentified, the mind is always just full of thoughts about the small non-existent self. And while it's doing that, all these other things are obscured, actually. So that program that runs in the mind relating to the small non-existent self, that program actually has to stop running for these things to be seen. It's like turning off the lawnmower. And for that to occur, you actually have to see that you are not the mind itself. You actually have to understand that. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So I was just thinking about here, there's a nuance here. People think that if this occurs, then you become an inert object and you will lose your personality and your character, because most people equate ego with personality and a character, and this is a mistake, because obviously to live in the physical world we have to have personality and we have to have character, but we don't have to identify with them as being as what we are. They're also just part of the instrument that awareness is using for its enjoyment, its pleasure, and its investigation of itself. Actually, it's revealing of the hidden treasure. So the character and personality are both necessary, but not to be identified with. They're just part of our fleeting existence. Yeah.
And it seems like I've seen this especially in non-duality. It's a lot of speakers, they are hesitant to talk about after self-realization phase. They dismiss it as saying that there is no such thing as after self-realization. What is your take on that?
You're talking about after self-realization? Sorry, was that?
Are there like changes that happen after self-realization?
Yeah, I mean, things, yeah, changes. You're talking about changes to personality and character now, are you? Changes to the way you exist in the world.
Yeah, changes in the way you exist in the world.
Yeah, well, I mean, things naturally things will change. For instance, if you identify yourself as being pure awareness and part of the universal consciousness, then automatically that implies that you see others as that as well. Okay, so immediately, and they're not others actually. They're just ephemeral manifestations of that as we are. There is no separation between between you and I, for instance. We are both just fleeting manifestations of consciousness. And once you see others as that, then the way you relate to others changes. Because if you see yourself, if you identify yourself as being an object in a universe of separate objects, which is what most people do when they identify with the ego, then you're going to see all other people as objects in the universe of separate objects, because that's what you think you are. Now, once you start doing that, then you treat other people as objects because that's what you think they are. And you know what kind of things that can cause once you start to objectify other people. So once you realize that there is no separation, there's no difference in essence, then immediately the way you relate to other people changes without you having to do anything. But that change only occurs, or is only apparent, when you are correctly identified. As soon as you misidentify and go back to identify with the ego or the small self, then you see where I'm going for here. So I mean, that's a natural change. There's lots of changes like that. So naturally, compassion for other people. That compassion's an interesting word, because you can't really foster compassion. Compassion is a natural outcome of awakening and seeing all others as the same essence, of the same essence. Yeah. So, and there's a lot of various things like that change. Let me think of compassion. Love of God and fellow man. Well, that's the same thing, really. I mean, God and your fellow man are the same. So your detachment. Now, detachment's an interesting one, because a lot of traditions say that you have to become detached, completely detached from all things, so you don't cling to anything. And that can lead to people thinking they have to leave the world and go and become a monk, or leave their family or whatever. But for me, I think that there's a slight problem here, in that, certainly from my point of view, once you realize that everything in the universe is of the same essence, it's all just pure consciousness, basically, you don't become detached from that, you become attached to everything, because everything is of the same essence. There is no separation. And once you become attached to everything, then there's no need to detach from anything, because you don't cling to things. But what I'm saying, when I say you don't cling, just say, for instance, that say you've got a dog that you're very fond of, you love your dog, and the dog dies. Okay, now, agreed, that's going to cause some mental pain. Now, I'll get into this in a minute, but there's a difference between mental pain and unnecessary suffering. It's going to cause mental pain when the dog dies, okay, but it's not going to leave a hole in your being, because everything that you are surrounded and live in is pure consciousness. It is that. There is no separation. So there's never any hole in that, okay? You cannot take away from that. Agreed, that particular manifestation of that has now gone, but you obviously it does cause some mental pain, because you like that, you were attached to that actually, but it doesn't leave a hole in your existence, so that you don't cling to that. You don't cling to that. You let it go. Everything comes and goes within that. You with me here?
Yes, I do agree with you that there are a lot of misconceptions around the word detachment. The way it gets perceived, it can create, in fact, it can create an unnecessary pressure to try to suppress your feelings of pain, thinking that one has to be detached from the pain. I mean, mental and physical pain are a part of life. They're unavoidable. Okay, but the suffering, the mental suffering and spinning that's caused by
by clinging, they are avoidable. So you might have mental pain at the loss of a loved one, but there's no need for that to cause continual mental suffering, because that continual mental suffering is actually caused by self-pity, and it's caused by misidentification.
And do you see is there a potential for transformation in this process? Like, is there because sometimes in some traditions this also gets seen as a path for evolution. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about that, I think one is that awakening is an instant process, actually, but then that has to be fostered by continually seeing that. Sorry, I'm just going to get rid of something here on my screen. That should be fostered by continually reawakening when you fall asleep, because people wake up and then they nod off again. Oh no, but no, these computers, they just keep throwing things up. Okay, there we are. Now, yeah. So things just keep coming up like those things on my screen, and you have to get rid of them by reawakening. So I recommend that people actually undergo this investigation that I went through at the beginning, investigation, the moment of experience. I do that on a daily basis, and I recommend that early on in the case, you do that at least 3 times a day. You spend about 20 minutes 3 times a day, deeply investigating the nature of this moment of reality, until the realization that you are pure awareness becomes completely ingrained and is what you are. You become that, rather than just you think that. You actually become that. And yeah, no, I've lost my thread. Where did I start from? Anyway, yes, that's my recommendation. And anytime any mental suffering occurs, oh yeah, we're talking about pain and suffering. Anyway, anytime any mental suffering occurs caused by spinning on the small self, relating things to the small non-existent egoic self, then that should be a wake-up call to reinvestigate and say, oh, now hang on, what is this suffering? Am I this suffering, or am I that which is aware of the suffering? And that's a very simple and quick way of doing it, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a really concise exercise, what you pointed out in the early of this interview. It's sort of like a direct path.
Yes, it's very direct. I mean, it can be done like that. So, a lot of traditions talk about vigilance. They talk about being vigilant all the time. For instance, Gurdjieff and Ouspensky, the path they recommended was to remember the self at all times. So while I'm talking to you, I continually remembering the self. Now, if you do that, you basically lose all spontaneity in life, because you're continually, you've got this thought running in the background. And for me, the way I do it is I just live spontaneously. And then if any suffering occurs, mental suffering or worry or angst, that's the wake-up call. That brings me back to awareness. But I don't try to remember the self at all times, because for me, that is to say, that just, well, it does. It removes all spontaneity. I prefer to live spontaneously within awareness itself as an expression of that. But just being alert to when I'm misidentifying. Yeah. And we all do it at times. We all nod off,
And has your own inquiry, self-inquiry, changed after once this realization had stabilized for you? Like after, is there something else you moved on to after opening?
Yeah, well, I've actually developed lots of different practices over the years to ground me in that, to bring me back to that, to allow me to discover more. But now I've now actually, it's now already come around in full circle. I still use the initial self-inquiry. I don't go through the first few phases of that, but no, I guess I do. I still use the inquiry, but then now I've developed this this exercise where you use the mind body as an instrument of that to know itself. And it's a deeply bodily sensation rooted exercise. It's a bit like yoga nidra. Have you heard of yoga nidra?
Yes, I love that subject. It's so fascinating.
I do yoga nidra every day. I have been doing it for 40 years, and I'm addicted to it. When I say I'm addicted, what I mean is that I will always look for a time in the day to do my yoga nidra, whatever I'm doing. So if I'm going out for the day, I'll try to figure out when I'm going to do my yoga nidra at some stage. And if we're going for a long drive, we pull over, and my wife is into yoga nidra too. She's a yoga teacher. So we'll pull over and put a tape on and do a yoga nidra. I just do it. I love it. It's just fantastic. Anyway, so you know the body rotation in the yoga nidra, where you rotate the mind around the body. So I've adapted that. I haven't adapted the rotation, but I have formed a new practice based on that, which increases you can feel it actually when you're doing it. It increases the endorphin levels in the body as you're doing the practice. And it's actually, well, you come out of it feeling blissful. That's actually what you do. It's actually a bliss producing practice. And I do that now every day, 2 or 3 times a day. I'm a bit of a bliss junkie, actually. I have to say that. I love bliss. So, yeah, I mean, I've actually recorded my own yoga nidra, it follows all the standard format of yoga nidra. There's nothing missing, but in the breath awareness section, I've replaced it with this endorphin boosting session. So I call it endorphin boosting, and I call the yoga nidra a turbocharged yoga nidra, because it's actually like you get all the benefits of yoga nidra, which are many and wonderful, but you get extra because you get this endorphin boosting process in the middle. So, I mean, the total effect of that I find is really just floating when you come out of it. So there we are.
Do you work with lucid dreaming or dreams in general?
No, not in general. I mean, well, I've never found my dreams particularly profound. I've always regarded them, and they tend to be, as just a way of the mind gets rid of everything that's accumulated in the day. So it's a bit like, yeah, but on the other hand, so although my dreams aren't profound, they are lucid in that when I'm dreaming, I am aware that I'm dreaming. So, but I have no control over my dreams. I just am aware that I'm dreaming.
And has this changed your relationship with the unmanifested? Do you feel like you are more in tune with the flow of objects from the unmanifested realm to manifestation? Like some yogis, they talk about being aware about objects arising, like like the increase in awareness to the degree that they are aware about what's going to rise up next.
You mean they can see into the future?
Yeah.
No. I have no yogic powers whatsoever. I don't see into the future. I regard myself as being completely without psychic powers. And I've got no interest in developing any powers whatsoever. You know, there's a famous story. You know Ramakrishna. You've heard of Ramakrishna.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Do you know anything much about him? I mean, I know I've read everything that's ever been written about Ramakrishna. I love the guy. To me, he's the most amazing human being that was ever born. It's incredible. However, so I'll just tell you a quick story. You might have heard this story, but Ramakrishna was sitting by the side of the banks of the Ganges, and he wanted to cross over the Ganges, so he's waiting for the ferry to come across. And a yogi came up to him and said, what are you doing? Yeah, I thought you were a self-realized person. I've heard you were amazing, but look, why are you waiting for the ferry? And he proceeded to walk across the Ganges and come back again. This is a yogi. And Ramakrishna, he said, that's amazing. He said, how long did it take you to perfect that? And the yogi said, about 20 years. And Ramakrishna said, 20 years effort to save 2 pice. Because that's the cost of the ferry, 2 pice. So what he was saying was this yogi had spent 20 years trying to perfect this psychic power, which was basically worth 2 pice. So Ramakrishna had no respect for psychic and physical powers, yogic powers at all. In fact, he said they.
Sorry, go ahead.
No. Well, he said they were something that would hold you back on the path to self-realization.
I was not particularly pointing to psychic powers. I meant to ask more about how has the sense of awareness like changed or developed over time for you in your own like personal experience?
Well, actually, you know, when I look back, I woke up in 1996. Okay, now that was over 25 years ago now. And when I look back at the way when I was awake, my mind state was then, and the way it is now, I would say there is no change. All that's happened is I've discovered more facets of the absolute. That's all that's happened. I've discovered more things. But the actual way that I relate to the world and my actual being is, when you're, as far as I'm concerned, when you're awake, and I'm talking about awakening to actually fully realizing that you are pure awareness itself. When you're awake, and that actual, the quality of that awakeness does not change. I mean, if you read, as you probably know, I've written many books now. When I read Beyond the Separate Self, which is the first one I ever wrote back in, it was a collection of articles written between 2000 and 2009. When I read that book, it resonates with me as deeply as when I wrote it. And it resonates with me as deeply as the last book I've written, which is, what's the last one? Oh, well, Absolute Reflections is one of, anyway. Well, my point is that everything I discovered then and my being then is basically as relevant as now. Nothing has changed in that way, but I have discovered a lot more things. I mean, because the more you investigate, the more you discover, and these discoveries are useful, you know. But I don't think it actually changes your inner being, because your inner being is pure awareness, and once you're fully identified with that, then there is no change within that, you know. You with me?
Yes. Yeah, I know what you mean, because it's still, ultimately it's stillness.
Yeah, the pure aware, radiant aware nothingness. That's the way I describe it. And that's always there. And that's what you are in essence, radiant aware nothingness. Yeah. Yeah. So.
Is there an insight or a fun discovery that you would like to share that you came across in your like when this awareness started?
I'll give you an example. I've discovered that time is elastic. Okay. Now, when I say time is elastic, what I mean by that is you can do an amazing number of things in a day, which and when you look back at the end of the day, you look, how did all that occur? You know, you couldn't have grokked that you could possibly do that and get through those many different tasks within a day without being totally exhausted. However, what happens with regard to time is that while you're awake and your mind is not running all the needless programs regarding the small self. I mean, when you're misidentified as a self-image, the mind is always running a lot of programs about the past, about the future, about self-interest, about self-aggrandizement, a lot of people run self-hatred as a background program. There are so many programs run within the mind relating to the small self, right? And they completely clog the mind up. Now, an example, a simile would be a computer. If you've got a computer running 100 programs at once, then it's going to be much slower than when it's running one program. Now, when you're awake, all of these programs relating to the small self cease running, and the mind becomes very still and very potent. Okay, so then any problem that occurs, it can solve it very quickly and very easily because it's not distracted. And actually, this also applies to this investigation. The more one-pointed the mind is, the better the investigation becomes. It becomes quicker, more quick, and more potent. Yes. So, and the mind within this, so when the mind is still like that and just ready for problems to occur, you can get a lot more done, and time seems to be elastic. It's just quite amazing, actually.
I want to go back to one of the early part of our interview where you mentioned about dark energy. I wanted to understand it a bit more clearly. If you, are there any metaphors from religions for that, like in Christianity or Hinduism, just to understand it a bit more clearly?
Well, I mean, yeah, that peace invocation from the Upanishads is probably the clearest one, that about however much it manifests from the unmanifest is unchanged. It's still full. It's never, it doesn't, by manifestation, it does not lessen itself, and the manifestation just arises within that and returns to that. Now, with regard to dark energy, oh wow, I just saw a Regent bowerbird. It's a very bright yellow bird. And it just flew past. So yes, so it's been shown actually that as I say, the amount of dark energy per unit of space is constant. And modern physics, and they haven't been able to determine the amount of dark energy per space, but for the universe to function in the way that it does, it has to be a constant. You can look this up. You could Google dark energy, cosmic constant, dark energy. You'll find out. So for that to actually be the case, the only logical way that can be the case, as I say, is if dark energy is actually infinite per unit, infinite within space itself. Now, this is another facet of this, is that the universe, they say the universe manifested from the Big Bang, okay? Now, if dark energy is infinite in each point of space, that means that at any point of space, a Big Bang could occur and the universe could be manifest from that, because the amount of energy at that point of space is infinite, okay? So then they say that the present universe that we live in is ever expanding, and is expanding. As it expands, it gets cooler and cooler, and eventually everything in it will cease to be. Because if you take anything which is comprised of cosmic energy and you cool it down, the cooler it gets, it's not only is it it's composed of waves of energy. Now, as it gets cooler, the waves get stretched out and they become smaller and smaller, and eventually at absolute zero, all energy flatlines. You know, you see a monitor and somebody dies, they flatline. That's what happens to energy. All the waves get longer and get stretched out, and eventually there's nothing. At absolute zero, no thing exists as a separate entity, okay? Now, they say that the universe is expanding and getting cooler and cooler as it expands, and eventually it will expand so much that it will return to absolute zero, in which case no thing will exist. Are you with me?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, at that stage, when no thing exists and everything is at absolute zero, a new Big Bang can still occur at any point in that infinite amount of space, because every point of that infinite amount of space contains an infinite amount of dark energy. So another Big Bang can occur anywhere at any time from that, within that. And within this, you can see these cycles. You know, in Hinduism, they talk about the cycle of evolution. There are four phases, and then it starts at one point, it goes to the four phases, and then returns back to the same, and it just keeps going in big cycles. And you can see how that could occur within, you know, the universe the way it is. Did that help too?
Yes, that does help to understand. The question I had was, if it's expanding into nothingness, and I hope I'm not misunderstanding this. Does that mean at a certain point all experiences come to an end?
Well, everything comes to an end. Everything. There's nothing, no thing that does not come to an end. That's right.
That's quite a wide, broad perspective to have. Thank you for sharing that, because it does help to like.
Yeah, I mean, it's just I mean, everything which is just a movement within the unmanifest, all movements commence at one point and end at another point. All movements do. That's the way movement is. It starts at point A and ends at point B. You know, everything which is just motion eventually comes to its terminus. So it arises from this aware, radiant aware nothingness, this stillness that pervades the whole universe, and it will eventually return there. Everything in existence. There is nothing that.
And what do you, from that perspective, what do you think the potential of evolution, does that, of human evolution, does that become irrelevant if it's?
Well, basically, I mean, look, humanity is a marvelous expression of the absolute through which it can enjoy its own and experience its own universe. But it's not the only one, and it's humanity will undoubtedly come to an end. Of course it will, just like anything. It will become an extinct species, you know. And from the point of view of consciousness itself, it's, as you said, it's irrelevant. Basically, it's irrelevant because consciousness has many other avenues of experience of its own manifestation. I mean, we tend to anthropomorphize everything and look at everything as being from the human point of view, but humanity is just another blip in the you know, time frame of consciousness. So yeah, and we are not we are in human form at the moment. We are not the mind body. We are the awareness, the consciousness in which that has arisen and to which that will return. So from consciousness point of view, no problem.
Yeah, from conscious point of view, we will just dissolve back into the consciousness.
And yeah, and from the human point of view, that's what will happen to us eventually. We will dissolve back into consciousness in the long run. I mean, lots of different religions have different ideas about what happens after you die, and maybe they could even all be true up to a point. However, eventually we will all return to the consciousness from which we when I say from which we came, I mean, that sounds like but which we are, actually, we are. We will just return to that which we are, and all of the manifest elements will cease to be.
What's your understanding about, because we talked briefly about death, how do you perceive death now after, like, through this, after self-realization? Has that changed your how you look at the process of death?
I've totally stopped worrying about it altogether. I actually like what the Dalai Lama says about death, and he says somebody said, "Might you worried about dying, or what do you think about death?" And he said, "Well, I don't know." He said, "But I'm looking forward to finding out." That's what he said. It's just another part of the great adventure of manifestation, you know. And eventually everything will return to the unmanifest. But there are lots of stages. I mean, if you read the Bhagavad Gita, it basically says that what happens when you first die is that you encounter that which you believe. Okay, so if you're a total materialist and you believe there's nothing happens after you die, you encounter nothingness. But if you believe that you are a devotee of Krishna, then you encounter Krishna Loka, for instance. You know, if you're a Christian, you might go to heaven, hell, or purgatory. You know, you basically get what you believe. But even then, this is still just a stage. It's a stage, and eventually, and I mean, I don't know. These are just theories, but all I know is that everything comes from consciousness and returns to that. And what we're in at the moment is just a stage. It's a human embodiment stage, and it's wonderful, you know. But it's just a stage. And, yeah.
Well, what's interesting to me is that at least it points out to, when we at least possibility that we may be making a lot of assumptions. Maybe in the mainstream we make assumptions about death, what happens after death, and based on that assumption, a lot of suffering gets created around the concept of death.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. I mean, really, basically, all we have all we each of us have is the present moment. That's all we actually have, the present moment. What's gone is gone, what will be, but we only have this present moment. And certainly to worry about what's going to happen after you die, that's totally counterproductive. It just takes you totally away from the present moment. And there's no way we can know what's going to happen after you die. I mean, Osho said a wonderful thing about it. He said, well, why are you worried about it? He said, either you'll cease to be, in which case all your suffering will cease, or you'll be reborn, in which case, what's the problem? So what's the problem? You know, I mean, it's really a total waste of time, effort, and energy to worry about it. People like to speculate. Humans love to speculate, you know, but we cannot know until it happens. So just let it go and live now. It's always now. Just the experience of the now as it is, and enjoy it. My whole thrust is to enjoy the now to the fullest.
And another thing that could another type of suffering that could ease up is also when you lose a loved one, like a pet or
Yes.
someone close to you. Instead of making assumptions that what happened to them, we don't know, maybe they are in a better place,
yes.
but making those assumptions can create a lot of suffering, assuming that that relationship is gone, or that you're forever disconnected from them. Sometimes there is, like, I feel like leaving it at unknown is better than creating stories off of these as.
I agree. I mean, in the long run, that person, maybe not initially when they die, but in the long run, that person will just return to the consciousness of which we are all manifestations. And that person, that consciousness is never lost. Consciousness is never lost. It never diminishes. There's no loss there. The only loss is of the ephemeral manifestation, but everything comes and goes. We know that. We've said that. Everything comes and goes. There's nothing that doesn't go. Everything comes and goes. And within that, your connection with that person, you are always connected to that consciousness that you are and that person is. So there's no loss of essential connection. There might be loss of bodily and mental connection, but there's no loss of essential connection. And you can connect with the mental and bodily connection just by remembering that person fondly, you know, by memory. But so to speculate what's happened to that individual after they die is, we have no way of telling, you know. I mean, if you're a Buddhist, for instance, you'd believe that there is a certain element which is going to be reborn, but who you've got, and even that's just a stage in the final dissolution back into the consciousness that we all are. So, you know, just basically, I mean, and as I said to you before, this is the thing about where somebody dies, is you will miss that person, and there will be pain associated with not seeing that person anymore. But once you fully grok that everything is consciousness, then that will not leave a hole, because you're still immersed in that. You're still immersed in that essential element of being that you are. And, you know, there's never any separation from that, actually. Yeah.
If you had to summarize this whole journey of awakening and consciousness, what we discussed today, like, how would you summarize it for someone who is interested in this path of awakening?
Well, that initial investigation that we went through, you see, for me, everything is to do with self-identity. If you're misidentified as a separate object in a universe of separate objects, that's always going to cause suffering, always. And the way around that is to investigate and see what is really the case. Am I really a separate individual being or object, or am I that in which the awareness in which they appear? And so for me, this initial investigation, to discover that one is pure awareness, and then to expand that to all other beings, that's the way. That's what it's all about. And everything else flows on from that. Once the full realization of pure awareness occurs, everything else, it takes care of everything, actually. Pure awareness takes care of everything, seriously.
This has been a beautiful conversation, Colin. Is there anything else you would like to share today with the audience?
Well, yeah, when Rick Archer, Buddha at the gas company, Buddha at the gas pump, asked me the same question, I think the fact that we are instruments of consciousness itself, through which it enjoys and experiences its own manifestation, I think this is a very important thing to bear in mind. So every thought and every sensation, every thought that you have and every sensation that occurs and is sensed by your body, they all appear in that which we are, pure consciousness. And in that way, we are instruments of that, okay? So if there's anything you can do to engender joy in your being, or to help others, and they are of the same essence of yourself, enjoy life, then this now for me is the purpose of life. Because as an instrument of that, then joy is the aim, actually, to enjoy its manifestation and to help enjoy it through all other beings that we encounter. And the way to do that, it really is to point other beings to awakening, so that they can awaken to joy itself.
And it seems like people seem to be interested lately in last few years in these kind of topics. And there are more resources available than in the past.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. It's actually wonderful now. The number of resources that are available. I mean, the internet's opened the whole thing up wonderfully, because every human mind is different, and every human mind has a different way, or which appeals to it, resonates with different paths into this awakening, you know. And now, because there are so many different ones available on the internet and in books and whatever, the chances of finding a path that you resonate with are much higher than they were in the past. I mean, back in the day, when you basically, say 100 years ago, I'd have only had Christianity, you know, going to the Methodist church. Well, I mean, that's pretty limited, you know. So sure, some people would get it from that, but I never did. But now it's just, there's an infinite variety, which is wonderful, you know. The one thing I would say within all that is, once you found an approach that you really resonate with and it really appeals to you, then it's best to stick with that approach and get all you can out of it. Don't hop from approach to approach, you know, because if you do that, you won't actually ever deepen the whole process, you know. Yeah. And within that, I mean, some people, it depends what you're looking for. If you're just looking for joy and happiness, then once you found the approach you resonate with, then really that is the way to go. If you're looking for, I don't know, amazing experiences or psychic powers, maybe you have to do other things, you know, but good luck with that one.
I think that's a great advice. And if someone wants to reach out to you for their own path, how can they connect with you?
Okay, well, they can email me. I'll give you my email address. It's colinj108@gmail.com. That's a small c, they're all small, colinj108@gmail.com. I'm happy to speak to anybody by email. I prefer email to Zoom because it's, talking to people is very time consuming, and I'm pretty busy, but I have now written over 300 essays and articles on facets of the absolute. So virtually any question that anybody sends me, I can just send them the requisite article or essay. And I'm always looking for new questions. If people come up with things I haven't considered before, I love that, because it's another avenue for investigation. I mean, the problem now I find is that I've spent so long and investigated, for so long, and I'm running out of new things to discover, not because they're not there. It's just that my mind hasn't come up with new questions, you know. So any new question, I love it. Just send them on, you know. That's great. So that I agree. Go on.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, and the other thing about that is that I've recorded about 14 guided investigations or meditations or relaxations, and I'm happy to send people links to these so they can just download them and do them, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, there is a lot to discover. I agree with you with the value of new questions, because that's kind of like pointers to more new awareness to discover.
Yeah,
And there's
yeah.
so much that keeps on coming. It's
right.
quite fascinating.
It is. I mean, there are some things that you can't discover by direct investigation, because basically they're I mean, so people, if people ask me a question that literally I do not know the answer to, and I cannot find the answer to, basically, or I just reply and say, sorry, I don't know about that and I can't help you. I mean, this thing about what happens after death, basically my attitude is I don't know. I've done various reading, and there are lots of different theories about what happens after death, but I'd have to say I don't know, you know.
Has yoga nidra helped you discover that kind of like newer, more new awareness?
So has what helped me discover that?
Yoga nidra.
No, I don't think so. I mean, yoga nidra to me is just the most wonderful recharge. It's fantastic. You know, you can lie down. I remember once I went to England, and I the day after I arrived, I was really jet lagged. I was staying with my sister and her, and it was a very noisy household, very noisy, and I couldn't get any rest. And we were meant to be staying there for another day. And I was you know, that feeling, I don't know if you've ever had it, when you're so jet lagged that you actually start to feel like the world is wobbly. It's like you're seasick. It's like you're out on a boat. Everything's kind of rocking, you know, it's very strange. Anyway, very disorienting. And this was about midday. And the next day we were going to drive a couple of 100 miles and go somewhere else. And I said to Janet, I said, look, I can't stay in this house any longer. It's just driving me mad. It's so noisy, so loud. So we did a yoga nidra, 20-minute yoga nidra, and I got up out of that and I was completely refreshed. We jumped in the car, drove off, and I was completely fine for the rest of the day. And that was, I mean, I was really in a state, you know, I was almost in a state of collapse. And 20-minute yoga nidra just did that too. So for me, yoga nidra is the most amazing physical and mental rejuvenation technique, you know, and in 20 minutes. My wife's got a yoga nidra. She's recorded, which goes to 26 minutes. And I've discovered that if you start at the beginning, at the resolve, which is about 7 minutes in, and end at the final resolve, the whole thing, you can do the whole yoga nidra in 15 minutes. And it's just as powerful as doing one that goes for an hour. As long as you go through all the stages and you're there with the yoga nidra, it's just incredible. So anyway, it's an amazing thing. But I don't think I've discovered new things during yoga nidra. No, I don't actually.
I think I may be confusing yoga nidra with the dream work. Like there are yogi, I guess, Tibetan practices for like working with dreams. I may have.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I will send you a yoga nidra. I'll send you a couple, and you try them out. Let me know what you think. Well, I'll send you my wife's, which is one I just talked about, and I'll send you mine, which is the turbocharged yoga nidra, which takes you through the endorphin boosting practices, and you can let me know how you go with them. But yeah, it was actually my first guru was Swami Satyananda Saraswati. Have you ever heard of him, Satyananda?
I
have
haven't.
Have you heard of Shivananda or Rishikesh?
I haven't.
Yeah,
I've heard of Ramakrishna.
Yeah, of course. Well, I should hope so. Yeah, anyway, so, but Satyananda basically traveled the world for 30 years teaching yoga, and he taught Hatha yoga, Kriya yoga, Karma yoga, Bhakti yoga, Raja yoga, and yoga nidra. These were and he taught them all from a very non-dogmatic way. He just taught the practices without any dogma. And yoga nidra was the main thing that, for me, it was the main thing he introduced to the West. It's a very powerful practice. And as I say, I just told you 15 minutes how powerful it is, you know, yeah, as I say, I do it every day, and I've been doing it for 40 years every day, and I just love it. It's just fantastic. So anyway, I'll send it to you. You can try it out. Yeah,
I'd love to check it out. I brought up the dream work because I find that realm as interesting to discover more new stuff from unmanifested. I feel like that realm can be interesting in
I'm sure it can. Yeah, in my case, it hasn't been, but I'm sure it can. As I say, my dreams are always very mundane, I'm afraid. Occasionally I'll have one with some cosmic influences, but generally they're pretty mundane. Nearly everything I've discovered by doing this investigation practice and then seeing where it leads me, and new queries and questions come up during the practice, and then I see where that takes me from there. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, we all kind of have different kind of portals.
We do, and they're all as valid as each other. You know, I mean, we yes, that's absolutely true. Yeah.
It was lovely meeting you, Colin, and yeah, I look forward to that exercise with yoga and nidra, and I'm also going to post your contact and link to your books in the description for this video.
Great, thank you. I've got a Facebook page called Beyond Awakening Publications, and I post on there, and I posted all my links on there. And when I write a new book, I've posted that on there. And I've got my Facebook page, but I'm a bit lazy, I must admit, when it comes to setting up websites. So, I mean, I worked in computers for many years before I came up here to live as a potter, and really, you think I should be doing that, but I'm naturally lazy, actually. So.
Yeah, if email is the fastest way to reach out to you, then I guess email should be.
But the great thing about email is it's personal. You know, somebody sends me a question, I answer them personally, and then I tend. What happens then is somebody asks me a question, and when an answer has come, because I don't just sit down and write an answer, I have to wait for the answer to come, and it nearly always comes during my investigation or my relaxation meditation. That's when it comes, and then the answer is written down, and then I turn that whole dialogue into an article, and that becomes an article in a new book. So that's nearly all my books after the second or third one are basically a collection of those, plus other things I've discovered during my meditations. And the other thing I do is I do a lot of reading, and I like to relate other mystical literature to my to pure awareness itself. So I do a lot of commentaries on mystical literature from the point of view of pure awareness, and I find that very interesting, because to me I love discovering the same understanding written in different language in the mystical traditions of the world. I mean, from the moment I'm reading, there's a very famous Christian mystic from the 14th century called John de Rysbrook. He's just an amazing guy. And I'm reading him, and I'm reading another book by Rumi. You know Rumi? Rumi's father was a great mystic. Well, his father was a great mystic. So I'm reading a book called The Drowned Book by his father. So I read books like this all the time, and Osho, I read all this stuff, and then I'll pick something up and think, my God, that just resonates so well, and then I'll start to write an article based on what's written, and a non-dual analysis of it. So yeah, that's basically how my books get written. So any new questions? Go
on. Have you explored some of the? I wouldn't say they are mystics, like Carl Jung goes more into the subconscious work, like exploring.
Yeah, I can't relate to that, I'm afraid. I mean, he has ideas which I have found interesting, but overall, no. I'm afraid Western psychiatry in general, Western psychology and psychiatry in general, I'm not really that interested in
mind.
For me, the mind is something that appears within the awareness that we are. So I'm more interested in relating everything back to pure awareness and using the mind as an instrument within that, but not actually relating to the mind as being part of our identity.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I feel like sometimes in that transition of into dissolving into awareness, I feel like that loosening up of subconscious programs, that can be kind of interesting, because there can be a lot of blind spots for a person that that may show up that they may not be aware about in their whole life. So it can be an interesting journey where you discover blind spots, not just about yourself, but about other people. So it's also kind of like the content of awareness, like
yes. But the point about all that is, as you said, it's the content of awareness. So that when any of that stuff, the subconsciousness comes up, it's still not awareness itself, it's just the content of awareness, as are our thoughts and sensations, So it is interesting, but it's not who or what we are. It's just something appearing in that.
Yes, but I also feel like if it's there, it's there. Like that's different from turning a blind eye on it. Like
I agree. The thing about all that is that you can see that it's something appearing in awareness. Now, if you identify with it as being who or what you are, then it has weight. You give it weight. But if you just see it as something, an ephemeral manifestation appearing in awareness itself, then it loses its personal weight. It doesn't affect you, right?
No, I meant more like being aware of it without giving any weight. Because
yes, well, that's right. Yes, well, that's wonderful actually to do that. That's yeah.
Because sometimes I notice, like as you had mentioned in the early part of our interview, sometimes self-realization can happen, but still the conditioning is still there. And that awareness about that what's there, I feel like it's kind of part of that deconditioning process.
Because that's right. Yeah, it is. Because when you see that conditioning from awareness itself, then when you see it like from that vantage point, then it loses its weight again, because it's just something that's coming and going within awareness itself. So you actually, the more you see your conditioning purely from awareness, the more reconditioned you become, and unconditioned by your previous conditioning, and reconditioned just by seeing it as just something appearing in that you are. So once again, it loses its weight.
Yeah, I agree with you. The reason I was mentioning that was because there is a difference between being aware of that without having any weight around it, just being aware that it's there, versus like sometimes, because some teachers, they are talking about self-realization, but they are not aware about conditioning, and they dismiss it off as like it doesn't exist.
No. Yes, that's right. I don't.
Do you see the difference?
Yeah, I do. I don't try to squash or
oh no. I was not pointing to you. I meant like
no. But what I'm saying is this approach doesn't try to squash or bury any negative emotion, any conditioning. It just allows it to come and go within awareness itself. So it doesn't have any weight, but you're not trying to push it aside, put it aside. You just let it come. Everything just comes and goes in that you are, which it does. Everything just comes and goes in that you are. I mean, it's just so simple, actually.
Thank you so much for clarifying that, because sometimes that I wanted to point that out, because sometimes in modern non-duality there can be tendency to dismiss things.
Well, that's classically called spiritual bypassing, actually. And and once you awaken to that pure awareness that you are, there's no need to bypass anything, because everything just comes and goes in that, and it can be beautiful. It can be a beautiful expression of that, but still have no weight as to who or what you are. It's just another phenomena that you observe as that. Because really, the whole universe, the whole cosmic show is just being observed by that which we are, pure awareness. And it's just purely entertainment. That's what it is. I think, who is it? Nisargadatta said it's all just entertainment, And that's right. He's right. It's just entertainment, Sure, really. Don't take any of it seriously.
Thank you for pointing out. that was a beautiful, subtle thing we discovered today in our conversation.
Yeah, that's
Thank
right.
you.
No problem.
I deeply appreciate your time. And yeah, if you ever feel like there's any other topic you would like to share, I'm more than happy to reconnect with you. I know you write a lot of books, so if there is any other topic that if that comes up to you, I would be more than happy to read it.
And equally, if you ever get any questions that you'd like to ask me, if you collect a few of them together, we could reconnect. Yeah.